Hi, and welcome. My name is Atanas Tujarov. I'm a CG specialist here at Chaos Group, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's new in V-Ray 3.6 for SketchUp. A lot of work has been done to improve it, and even though I can't show you every single change that we've made, I'm going to walk you through the major updates, and then I'm going to show you how to use the new features. Before I do that though, I'd like to say a few words about the idea behind V-Ray for SketchUp. We wanted to make a rendering engine that was easy to use and yet powerful. In other words, all the tools that you need are there and you can use them to create beautiful images. And be fast, not just to render fast, but also to be set up in a way that's fast to use, so you get results faster. And this is just a short list of the things that I'm going to cover in this webinar. We've made a lot of UI and workflow improvements. We've also made some very big speed improvements. We now support the adaptive lights. We've also made some new materials and textures, which I'm going to cover. I'm going to show you how to use them. We have new and modified features. Again, I'm going to walk you through them. And we have some major GPU rendering improvements. We now support the hybrid rendering system. We support displacement, aerial perspective, and so on. I'm going to start by explaining the adaptive lights. Basically, the adaptive lights is a new fast lighting mode that will evaluate only a certain number of lights instead of every single one, which can be very advantageous in scenes like this one, where you have lots of light sources and you want to render quickly. Now, the adaptive lights can increase the render speed up to 7 times. As we can see in this video here, the render on the left is done with adaptive lights off in 29 minutes, and the render on the right is done with adaptive lights on in 4 minutes. So that's a bit more than 7 times speed improvement. Okay, so let's move on to the UI. The interface is now much cleaner and much simpler. Now the best way to describe it is just to go into SketchUp and show you. So if I open the asset editor, you're going to see some changes here. But before that, I'd like to say a few words about the toolbar. It's updated with new icons, and they're also scalable to 4K. Now, probably the first thing that you're going to notice that we've now changed the way you select your rendering engines. We have CPU and GPU separated, very easy to select. We also have the options for selecting a device right next to the GPU. You can render on both the CPU and the GPU simultaneously. We call that hybrid rendering. I'm going to talk about it later. We also have interactive and production for both the CPU and GPU, and we have just a simple quality slider to control the quality. And if I expand some of the options here, as I move the slider, you'll see how the slider changes the options. So you can basically understand how V-Ray is working just by moving the slider left or right and choosing your quality. Another major change that you might see is in the environment. You'll see that we moved the aerial perspective, and now we call it volumetric environment, and we have a separate tab. And with this switch, you can enable aerial perspective. And we also have environment fog, and I'm going to talk about environment fog later on, which is new to V-Ray for 3.6 for SketchUp. And like I said, now the volumetric environment, as well as a lot of other things, are very simple to turn on and off as just a simple switch. And then if you go to the lights, we'll see that we have a simple switch for turning on and off the lights. We also have intensity, which changes the intensity multiplier down there. And we also have color. And this is just for quick access, so you don't have to expand the right fly off menu. Now we also have made some changes to the materials as well. We now have a new material. We call it the VR Scan, which supports the scan materials that you can find in our library, which I'm going to talk about later. We also have options for binding. So let's say that I want to change the color of Chris's shirt. Then in the binding, we'll see that my color is linked with the SketchUp color. So when I change it, it will update in the material as well. We also have options for texture. We have a texture helper that will be applied only in SketchUp, so the material is not affected at all. And by doing that, now I can have, let's say, a reflection glossiness map without having a diffuse map, because I already have UVs in SketchUp. And if you notice, we've made also some changes to the reflection. Now everything that is linked to the reflection is in one place. And if I render here, you'll see that the Texture Helper is only used for display purposes. So if I lower the exposure here, we'll be able to see that we actually are using the diffuse color that's in the material. So we can't see the Texture Helper here. And it was too bright because we increased the multiplier to 5. So we have completely rearranged the material, so go through it and see what else we have changed. I think that you're going to like it better this way. We have also made some tools for UVs that I can show you right now. They're called UV tools. And we have triplanar projection, and this is just the fit option. It's going to try to fit the texture inside of the bounding box of the model. And it works not only with simple objects, but with complex geometry as well, so try it out. And this is just barely scratching the surface. We've done lots of changes to the V-Ray for SketchUp. Let's move on to the next thing. We now have new texture maps that I'd like to show you next. We have a gradient texture, color, temperature, and a new noise texture map. Now, the best way to explain all this is, again, to go into SketchUp and just load a scene file that I have here. And we're going to take a look at the gradient first. Let's load it. So let me open the asset editor and just position it so it's out of the way. And then I'm going to enable the interactive render. And this is the scene. I'm just going to choose a region to render just so it renders more quickly. So we're going to focus on this part of the scene so I can show you what it does. We're looking for a material called light trails, and this is it. So if you go into the color, diffuse color slot, we can see that we have the gradient texture, and this is how you can find it. There it is. And you might also notice that we have rearranged all the textures. They're now in categories, so they're a lot easier to find. So the gradient has a few options here. We have presets, a few presets that you can try out. I'm not going to show you right now. We also have different types. We have V, U, box, circular, all different types of gradients. We're going to use the V type. We also have different interpolations, linear and smooth. Now, smooth is just a different way of interpolating. We can see that we have a harsh line in linear mode, but if we go to smooth mode, then everything is much, much smoother. Now we can also create tags just by left-clicking, and we can remove them by right-clicking. We can also move them around and change the color. And if I click on the color, you'll see that we also have made something new here. We have a new color picker, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So basically, we have options here for color space, and color space means that you're going to view the color in this case, sRGB space, so with gamma applied. And we also have rendering space, which is going to view the color linear. And in sRGB is basically viewing the color in the same way it's in the frame buffer. And with rendering, we'll have to disable the sRGB in the frame buffer to be able to see the same color. So that's the color that we see right now. But we're going to use the sRGB mode for this one. So let's try to change the color. We also have ranges here, either from 0 to 1 or from 0 to 255, depending on what you like. We're going to stick to 0 to 1. And we have different options for changing the RGB or HSV values. So if I change the H value, which is a hue value, you're going to see that the sliders move around just picking a color. And now we have selected a color and we can apply it, which will only apply to the render. The color picker will stay on. And let's say that we don't like the color, we can choose a previous color, which is gonna load the previous settings, and we can apply it as well. We can also save colors, and if I click OK, the color picker is gonna go away, and V-Ray is going to restart the render one more time to make sure that every single change that we made is applied. We can also fine-tune the position with this slider. We can input values here. Let's say that you want finer control. We can just say 0.5, and it will be very hard to move that by the mouse. But with the position slider, we can. We also have options for noise. So if I increase the amount, we have noise in the gradient. And we have options for frequency as well. So this is the gradient. Next, I'm going to show you the color temperature. So I have a different scene for that as well. Let's go and open it right now. This is the temperature scene. Nope, I won't save the changes. So let me remove the region here so we see the whole thing. And I'm going to draw another region and focus in that area right there. We're going to focus on this light. So we're looking at the street light emissive material. And right now that material is applied to this lamp and to basically all the lamps. And if we go to the color texture, we see that we have a temperature map. And this is where to find it. Now if I apply a new one, it's going to reset the settings. And we have both color and temperature. We're interested in the temperature. We can choose it from here. And if I change the Kelvin value to something warmer, let's say 2800, the color now is going to be warm. And we also have a color multiplier. And if I increase it, the lamp will get brighter. And this is basically the result. Like I said, this is new to V-Ray for SketchUp 3.6, so check it out. Now let's move on to the next thing, and that's the new noise texture map. Now let's open another scene here. This is the noise B texture. And we have some tiles here that is just a very simple scene with a few light sources that I'm going to show you. Now let's start the interactive render again. And again, I'm going to make another region here, just so it updates more quickly that way. And this is the tiles, and we can see that we now have separate bump and displacement mapping, and we also have switches to turn bump on and off, as well as displacement. I'm going to talk about displacement later. And this is the noise B texture, and here's where you can find it. It's under the 3D textures, because it's a 3D textures noise B. And if I select it, it's going to reset all of the settings. And this is the basic noise that you might find in, let's say, Maya or Max. We have options for color. We have different types of noise and regular, fractal, turbulence. In this case, we're going to use fractal. We have size. We have iterations, which control the detail of the noise. If I increase the size, you can see how that changes. We also have levels, low and high, which will control the contrast of the noise. And if we scroll down, you'll find use 3D mapping, and we'll now be able to see the changes that we make in the render itself. So if I decrease or increase the noise, you're going to see how that will affect the render. I will also lower the contrast a little bit, and maybe increase the iterations so we have more detail. And the phase will basically offset the noise. And like I said, right now we're using the 3D mapping, so in the texture placement, everything will be grayed out. If I disable the 3D mapping, now we have options here that we can change. But in this case, we're going to use it. So this is the noise texture. I'm going to just stop the render and close everything so we can move on to the next thing, which is the viewport rendering. Right now we can render in the viewport itself, and I'm going to show you with another scene that I'm going to load right now. This is the scene. And this is the new button for viewport rendering. Basically, this will enable the render inside the viewport itself. We can also navigate and do stuff. I'm going to show you just by clicking it. You'll be able to, in a few seconds, V-Ray is now exporting the scene. And there you go. The render has started. And now if I move around, the render will update basically instantly. I can rotate the camera, zoom in and out and pan, and do basically everything as if I'm in the viewport itself. And if I reset my view, V-Ray is again going to update. And I also have a button here for render region, so I can draw a region and focus on a certain area. And if I hold down Shift, I can also make another region and another, and basically I can make as many regions as I like in areas I want to focus. Now if I disable it, all of the regions will be gone and the render will continue from there, so the rendering information is not lost. So you can use the viewport render for look development. And right now I can tell you that I'm seeing a problem, and the problem is with this material that we see down there. The diffuse color is black, and it shouldn't be. It should be a wood material. So let's check the material and see what's going on. Let me find it first. It's the wood A material. And if I go to the settings here, and you can see that it's black. It's not supposed to be black. And if I go to the diffuse map, we see that we have a warning. Basically, the map is nowhere to be found. And I can tell you that we also have some other problems. So if I select another material, maybe this painting material, again, we get a warning that the texture is not found. And even though we see it because it's loaded in the SketchUp bitmap buffer. But if something happens to the file, that texture will be lost forever. So that's not good. We need to find that texture and relink it. In V-Ray 3.6, we have a new tool that's going to make that job very easy. We can find it in Extensions, V-Ray, and then File Path Editor. And that's a new editor that we've made. It lists all the textures that we have in the scene, and we can see all the embedded, missing, and OK textures. And we have different categories to arrange them. And first we're going to focus on the embedded textures. Like I said, they're embedded in the SketchUp bitmap buffer itself, and this painting texture is embedded right now. But we want to archive those on the hard drive so we don't have issues. We have a button for that. It's called Archive. And if we choose a directory where to archive them, we can simply say select folder, and all of the textures will be archived there. Now it looks as if nothing has happened, but I assure you that V-Ray has copied all the textures there. So now we need to relink them, and we have a button for that as well. It's called relink. So we click that button, and we're now in the assets folder. We say select folder, and now SketchUp has relinked all of the textures. And we have a button for doing that at the same time, archive and relink. We can see V-Ray update in the background. And now we only have one texture that is missing, and we need to relink that as well. So click on the repath button and navigate to the texture. I know where it is. So it's on the desktop. It's in the missing assets. Open. And now that texture is okay as well. And as soon as we did that, V-Ray updated, and it's now okay. So we now have the texture applied to the diffuse of the material. So now every single texture is okay. We can close the file path editor and move on to the next thing. I'm going to stop the render. So this was the file path editor. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about is the improved denoiser. So now we can fine twig the denoiser settings without re-rendering. And we have a new effects result render element that's going to show the denoiser and the lens effects together. I'm going to use the same scene for this one. Go to the settings and disable the interactive render. So now I'm in production mode, and I'm going to lower the quality to low quality, and then I'm going to switch on the denoiser. And then I'm going to click render and wait for it to finish. So now V-Ray is rendering. And as soon as that's done, the denoiser is going to start working. And now the denoiser has finished as well. And we have our effects result that I was talking about. And like I said, the denoiser and the lens effects will be stored here. So if I enable the lens effects, you're going to see that they're in the effects result. And if I click on the denoiser, we're going to see the denoiser only. And in RGB, we're going to see the raw render. And this is the after the denoiser. And you can see that it's done a beautiful job cleaning the noise and retaining the detail in that texture. And like I said, we can also change the denoiser settings without re-rendering. So if I go to the settings here, we can see that I'm on the default settings, but let's say I'm going to choose a preset, a strong denoiser, and say update. The denoiser is going to update and recalculate, and this is the strong denoiser result. But I'm going to stick to the default one since it calculates faster and it's good enough. And this is the result. And this is all about the denoiser. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Just let me close everything. And next we have the improved proxy object. So now proxies can be animated. We also have proxy export options and different preview modes. I have a video that I can show you here. And this is the animation rendered from SketchUp itself. Let's watch that again. So that was the animation, and right now I want to show you something. This is the V-Ray mesh viewer. So if I choose a proxy that's animated, we have a timeline. And if I scroll that timeline, you can see the animation that the tree has. Let me just zoom in so you can see better. All right, so this is the animation that we saw rendered. So now basically we can load the proxies. I have another scene here, the animation scene. And here we have the proxy objects loaded. And here's the import options. If I import another proxy here, just let me go to the assets folder and find the tree A animated proxy. I can place it anywhere in the scene. I'm going to show you in the asset editor the options that we now have. So if I go to the proxy tab and select the tree that I've now imported, we have preview options, and we have several types of options. We have bounding box, which is going to display the tree in its bounding box. We also have point, which will place a point at the origin. This is very quick for us because SketchUp doesn't load a lot of geometry. And we also have custom preview. In this case, we don't have custom preview, so nothing is displayed. And we have whole mesh, and you should be careful here. SketchUp might not be able to handle a lot of polygons. And we also have animation, and we can turn it on and off. And we have different playback types. We can change the playback speed and offset. So that's the new options that we have under proxy. We also can render animation, and we have two scenes here. And one is sunrise and the other is sunset. And if you take a look at the shadows, I'm going to undock it so you can see more easily. Let's go back to sunrise, and you can see that the time is animated. Now, if you want to do that yourself, you can go to View and Animation. And there you can find the settings here for the animation. And just a few seconds. Oh, there they are. And just enable scene transitions. And here you can specify the time. In this case, it's 8 seconds. And then I'll go to the settings here and just show you how you can set things up. Go to the camera, and here you'll find render output. And in the render output, you should enable save image. Without enabling save image, you won't be able to render animation. And then there's the animation tab. When we enable it, we have several options. We have entire animation, which is going to be that 8 seconds. We also have frame range. So you can specify a custom frame rate. Right now is 240, which is 8 seconds, but you can specify, let's say, 120. We also have options for motion blur, and we can also get the animation range from that animation settings window that SketchUp has. And then when we click render, the animation is going to start rendering. Now I'm not going to do that now because we don't have time to, render an actual animation. So this is about the proxy. I'm going to close everything and move on to the next thing, which is the V-Ray Environment Fog. Now we support Environment Fog, and I want to show you what that is. So let me just open a scene here, and that's the Environment Fog scene. And right now the environment fog is, like I said, in the volumetric environment. And there's a simple switch to turn on and off like that. And it's right next to aerial perspective. So aerial perspective is by default and the environment fog is next. And we have color here. We have emission. We have emission multiplier, distance, height. Basically the same things you will find in the aerial perspective. And we also can affect by lights and scatter GI. So we have options that the fog is affected by none of the lights or by all of the lights, which you can find here. And we can also select individual lights and say you're going to affect the fog. And we have this light underscore God rays that we're going to use in this case. So let me first start the interactive render so I can show you how this works. And I'm going to disable the environment fog just so you can see the result without it. So this is the result without the environment fog, and then I'm going to enable it. So V-Ray is going to export the scene again. Every time the environment fog is activated, V-Ray has to export the scene, so it might take a little while to refresh. And this is what the scene looks like with the environment fog. You can see God rays here. And the color, it's bluish because, the fog is bluish because of the color. And again, I'm going to make a render region just so it renders more quickly that way. And if I enable the emission, you're going to see that the fog is actually going to emit light. So it's going to appear lighter. And as soon as V-Ray updates, you're going to see that. Oh, there we are. And if we compare before and after the fog, you can see that it's lighter. So you can play with the emission settings. We also have distance. So if I decrease the distance, the fog is going to get thicker. And we can also affect by light sources. Like I said, if I enable all the lights, the fog is going to look very, very thick. And it's not like it's actually thick, it's just that V-Ray is calculating all of the lights, and when they scatter inside of the fog, it looks brighter. Now in this case, I'm going to choose a single light source, and it's the light God rays. I have other options, but this is the light I want to scatter inside of the fog itself. So as soon as V-Ray updates, we're going to see the result. And this is the final result, and even though it's still rendering, we can see God rays here, and that's because of the shadows that are casted by the trees. So this is basically the environment fog. I'm going to stop the render here, close everything, and just go to the next thing, which is V-Ray scene import. We now can import V-Ray scenes from other applications. So let me just close everything and go to another scene here. And that will be the V-Ray scene import. Okay, so that's the scene. It's a very, very simple scene, and it's already loaded in SketchUp itself. Now I'm going to show you how to load it. It's very simple. I'm going to go to 3D Studio Max for this example. And let's just render to see what the result is. Okay, so this is the result that we get in Max. So how can we transfer this scene? Well, it's very simple. Just right click and say V-Ray Scene Exporter. And that will open this dialog. And we basically make sure to save the scene in the location. So we export a file path. And then we simply click export, and the scene will be exported somewhere on our hard drive or the network. And then when we go back to SketchUp, we can find it. I'm going to delete the old one and just open a new one. And then when I click at the origin and hit escape, I'm going to have the new scene imported. And these are the options that we have, same as the proxy. And we also can turn on and off the lights. And if I click render here, we're going to see the result, that it's very, very similar to the one in 3D Studio Max. And that's the whole idea. So you can basically transfer your scenes very easily from one application to another. Let's say you've done things in Max, but then you want to switch to SketchUp, you can. And like I said, the rendering result will be very similar. Now let me stop the render and move on to the next thing. So next we have V-Ray Scan support. These are photoreal scanned materials. They are scanned from actual materials, so from real world objects. They look amazing and you don't have to set them up, so let me show you how to download them. Just go to our website on the downloads section, and then you'll find V-Ray Scans. And here you'll find our library. So we have 23 pages of scans. Lots of materials. Basically everything you can think of you can find here. And we are expanding our library as it is, so you're going to find lots more in the future. And here we have different categories, and let's choose the fabric because we need a fabric material for this one. And let's say I'm gonna download one to show you. I'm gonna download this one and just click download, and yep, I want to save it. And just in a few seconds you're gonna download the material, and then we can import it into SketchUp. So let's go back to SketchUp and just open a scene here. That's the V-Ray Scan scene. And here's just a simple scene so I can show you what this looks like. Let me open the asset editor. And here just click on the scan materials, and that's one of them. And if we click on file open, we can basically load the material from our assets library. I'm going to open this one, the one that we've downloaded. And here we have different options. We have options for tiling. We also have options for color space, so sRGB and all different types of color spaces. We also have average BRDF, which will average the BRDF and it's not going to be affected by the texture and the material. And we have options for appearance as well, so we can change the color of the material after it was created. Gamma, saturation. We have options for texture placement as well, but the tiling factor is there to help you. And we have also options for clear coat as well. So this is the material, and the way you apply it, you just treat it like a normal material. It doesn't require special attention. And if I render, you're going to see the material applied to the pillows. So let me again just make a region, just to draw a region around the pillow so we can see what's going on. And this is what it looks like. Like I said, it's a very real, photorealistic material, so you don't have to adjust any settings. Basically, you get the material, you apply it, and out of the box you get realistic materials with textures. So that's cool. That will save you a lot of time, so make sure to check out our library. We have lots of materials there. So I'm going to close everything and move on to the next thing, which is going to be the V-Ray GPU. And we've done lots of changes to the V-Ray GPU, and one of them is including the hybrid rendering that we have in Max and Maya. And with the hybrid rendering, we've basically translated the CUDA code so the CPU can understand and calculate it. So now your CPU can help your graphics card with the calculation. We're still using the GPU rendering engine, and the CPU is just helping your GPU calculate the image. Now there are lots of benefits, and you can go to our website and have more information about it. I'm just going to show you how it works. We also support now aerial perspective and displacement, but I have a video here about the hybrid rendering that I want to show you first. It shows that we're going to be able to render the image much more quickly using both the GPU and the CPU simultaneously. And then I'm going to jump right into SketchUp and just show you how this works. I'm going to first show you how to set up the hybrid rendering, and let me open just a new scene here. Alright, so this is the scene. Let me open the asset editor, and here in the settings under the GPU you will find the devices, and it's not like there's hybrid rendering option anywhere. You just select the CPU and the GPU together and they will calculate. You can render on the CPU only, which is very advantageous. Let's say you don't have a computer with a graphics card, you can still render your scene on the CPU, which is great. But in this case, I'm going to use both the CPU and the GPU. And when I click render, basically nothing will be different, except now your CPU is going to render with the GPU together. So that's about the hybrid rendering and how you can set it up. So let me now go under the volumetric environment, and here we now, like I said, we now support the aerial perspective. So I'm going to disable it first. And as soon as the V-Ray starts rendering, you're going to see the result without aerial perspective. And this is it. So basically right now we're rendering on both the CPU and the GPU, which is going to be quicker than rendering only on the GPU. So we're utilizing all of the power that we have available on our computer, which is great. So let me make a small render region, and we're going to look at it to see the changes that we make. It's just that so it updates more quickly. And let me enable aerial perspective, and every time I enable it, V-Ray has to export the scene again, so it might take a while. And there you go. There's the result with aerial perspective, and you can clearly see the difference. And if I change the visibility range, it's going to be even more noticeable because the fog is going to get thicker, as you can see. I can also lower the height of the fog, and that will just basically lower the fog. It's going to be very near the ground, as you can see here. So basically, if I render the top part of the image, you're not going to be able to see fog. So I can show you that right now. You can barely see any fog up there. So most of the fog is, like I said, near the ground. And you can get pretty good results, pretty, let's say, dramatic results if you want to just make a spooky atmosphere or something like that. Like I said, you can't see anything on the top, but at the bottom you got lots of fog. So that's one way you can set up the fog if that's what you like. And the reason why the fog looks a little bit yellowish is because of the filter color, and you can choose basically any color that you like. We also have different options for affecting the environment and the background. So now, right now, the background is affected, and you can see the difference. And if I turn it off, you're going to see a change here. So V-Ray updated, and yeah, right now the environment and the background are not affected. But like I said, you should keep the environment and the background always affected, unless you have a different thing in mind. You have a specific goal. So that's about the aerial perspective. I'm gonna just return the values to what they were before we started adjusting. And I'm going to move on to the next thing. Let me just first let V-Ray update with the new settings. I'm going to remove the region and let V-Ray render the whole image. And I'm going to switch to another camera for the next thing. And this is for the displacement itself. I'm just going to let V-Ray render a little bit of the image. And right now, displacement is working, and I can see that we have depth of field. I would like to disable that so we are able to see more clearly what's going on. And again, I'm going to make a small render region so it updates more quickly that way. Okay, so this is with the displacement. It's working. So let me show you where you can find it. I can adjust it. So this is the displacement material, and you can find displacement under the maps. And here it is. Right now it's switched on, and we can switch it off with this switch. Very easy, very quick. So now this is the result without displacement, and you can see the change in the swatch as well. So I'm going to make another render region so you can see the difference between on and off. I'm going to expand the options and enable so we're able to change the options here. So right now the amount is going to be too much. As we can see in the swatch, it's just way too much. So what we can do is just lower the amount. So that's exactly what I'm going to do next. Just take the slider, slide it to the left, and we're going to have less displacement. We also have options for shifting the displacement. This is the result from the amount. And the options for shifting, we can basically shift the whole displacement along the normal. We are not going to be able to see it in the render region, but I think we're going to be able to see it in the swatch. So that's just shifting the displacement along the surface normal. And like I said, we won't be able to see it there just because of the way it is. So let me bring that down because it's way too much. And we also have options for optimization. View dependent means that V-Ray is going to subdivide the mesh according to how far away from the camera it is. Then edge length and subdivisions will be basically your quality, your displacement quality. So that's that about the displacement. Let's move on to the next thing. We go back to PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about other GPU rendering improvements. The subsurface scattering material, also known as the SSS material, is now supported by the GPU. We also have light directionality that is now supported as well. And the shadow catcher is also supported. So let me jump into SketchUp and show you these things. I'm going to open another scene here. This is basically a model of the house. Let me open the asset editor, and this is the wrapper material. You can find it here. And these are the options. I'm going to disable it for now so we don't see what it actually does. And as soon as I disable the mate option, the other options are grayed out, so you can't use it. Before I show the wrapper material, I'd like to show you the subsurface scattering material. So let me select it. It's applied to the house. So let me go to the settings and make sure that I'm rendering on the GPU, and I'm rendering with hybrid rendering enabled. So I'm going to start the RT engine, and this is the house. Right now V-Ray is rendering. I'm going to make again a small render region near the house so we'll be able to see very easily the changes that we make. And we can now see that the SSS material is actually working. So let me just change a few settings here. Let's change the scale. And if I lower the scale to, let's say, 0.1, then the SSS will be nearly invisible. You might not be able to see any SSS at all. So you can control the amount of SSS with the scale. And there's also another option, and that's the scatter radius. You can't see it in the swatch as well. So let me just change the scatter radius to, let's say, 3. And now you can see SSS again. And if I increase it further, then it's going to be even more visible. So maybe to 5. So like I said, with the scale and scatter radius, you can control the amount of SSS. And right now we are rendering on the GPU, so that's supported. Let's see some other regions here of the house. So next we're going to take a look at the rectangle lights directionality. So let me show you that. I'm going to make another render region that's on this shadow here. So we're able to see what the lights are doing. So let me go to the light lister and just select this first light, and this is the directionality. So it's now working, and if I lower it, you'll see that the intensity will also be lowered because now the light is more spread out. So if I change the render region to someplace else, you'll see that the light is more spread and the overall intensity is lower. Now if I increase the directionality, the overall intensity will also increase, but the light will be much more focused. So if I render someplace else, you'll see that there's almost no light there, and now the light is surrounding the house. Basically, it's focused around the house. So that's the directionality. It's now supported on the GPU, and if I just input the values that were there before, we can see that we're back to the way it was. So I'm going to disable the region so we can render the whole image. And next we're going to take a look at the wrapper material. So like I said, I showed you where you can find it, and you have to input a base material, and in this case it's just a generic material that's applied to the ground. And then we are just going to be enabling the mate, and as soon as we enable the mate, we're able to see the background. So basically the mate option will make the ground transparent because the alpha is -1, which means that we don't have an alpha, but we also have shadows, as you can see here. So the shadows are stored in the alpha channel, and I'm going to show you that now. So you can see that we have shadows in the alpha channel, and we also have color in the shadow. So it's not just black and white information, we also have color information. And if I want to disable the shadow, it's just a simple switch. And now the shadow is gone. So we no longer have shadows. So if I go to the RGB, you can see that we no longer have shadows that are casted on the background itself. And if I enable them, they're back on. And it's recommended to keep them on because it looks more natural. And we also have options for affecting the alpha and tint. And for more advanced users, we have GI options as well. And like I said, we have alpha contribution. So if I set it to normal, like right now it's -1, so we're able to see the background. If I set it to normal, that means that our alpha is going to be solid and we're not going to be able to see the background. So if I go to the alpha channel, you can see that it's white. I'm going to put it on -1, so I'm able to see the background, which is just a still image, basically a texture. And that's it. That's all about the wrapper material that is now supported on the GPU, like I said. So, as you've seen, we've made a lot of changes to the GPU. We now have a lot more things supported, and in the future, we're going to have even more things for you. So let me get back to the PowerPoint presentation and finish it off. So just to recap, we've basically skipped the 3.5 service pack and we're jumping into 3.6, and it's a lot more improved. We made a lot of changes to the UI, so now everything is much better. We have rearranged some stuff, and we're not trying to confuse you guys. I know that it will probably take some time for you to get used to the new UI, but I think it's arranged much better this way. Now everything is, you can turn on and off everything with switches, which is a lot better. We've also changed the position of aerial perspective. It's now under volumetric environment. You can turn it on and off. We also have environment fog in there as well, if you want to make God rays and all sorts of other effects as well. We have also rearranged the materials, so now everything, let's say, that's reflected that's related to the reflections is in one place, so you don't have to go through a lot of different menus to get the options that you need. And it's same for the refractions and everything else basically. We have also made it easy for you to switch between the two different rendering engines that come with V-Ray. They're completely different. So one is CPU based, one is GPU based. And it's very easy when you're on the GPU to switch between devices, and you can render on the CPU only or on the GPU, or you can render on both of them at the same time, which I talked about, and it can be very advantageous. We also have a new color picker, so that's going to be much easier for you to pick colors and save your colors and make a custom palette and stuff like that. We also have a lot of speed improvements, not just with the adaptive lights, but we've also made some other optimizations to V-Ray itself, so it should be a lot quicker. We also have animated proxy objects, so you now have animation, and we support motion blur, so you can have basically animated objects in SketchUp, which is a bit odd because SketchUp doesn't support animation. It can only transition between scenes, but now with V-Ray you can have animation. And we also have scan materials, which look amazing. They're very photorealistic because they're scanned from actual materials. And we have a technology that's scanning the materials and produces that materials that you can find in our library, which is ever expanding. We are soon going to have at least 1,000 materials and then even more. So now everything is supported in SketchUp, and you can download from our website and use those materials and save a lot of time just trying to figure out how to make the materials yourself. We have also made a lot of GPU improvements. So we are developing new technology for the GPU, and when you see something, let's say in Max, it's probably going to go in SketchUp very soon. So stay tuned. We have more for you in the future. And the list with minor changes and bug fixes is practically a mile long. So I encourage you to try the new V-Ray 3.6 for SketchUp and see for yourself. Now, as a special offer, we offer a free trial V-Ray 3.6, and it's going to be available for users who have previously downloaded V-Ray 3 for SketchUp. And if you already have a license for V-Ray 3, then upgrading to V-Ray 3.6 is going to be free. You can upgrade to it right now, so that's great. You don't have to pay anything, so why not upgrade? So if you have questions, make sure to check out our resource hub page where you can find links to video tutorials, help documentation, past webinars, and much more. Also make sure to check out the release notes. There you'll find a complete list of everything that we've done in the new V-Ray 3.6 for SketchUp. So that's important. Visit the link that you see below. That's where you'll find the resources that I'm talking about. And make sure to visit our website and our YouTube channel. So basically go to YouTube, type Chaos Group TV, and you will find our YouTube channel. And there you will find a lot of videos and tutorials and stuff like that. So you can learn more about V-Ray that way. And thank you for joining in this webinar, and have a good day.